Welcome to Words of Stardom. This is CH. I will be covering the Global X Defense Tech ETF that has the Bloomberg ticker SHLD in this video, which is part of my Absolutely Biased Comments or ABCs series. The aim of this series is to cover one fund per video, to share how an individual investor can try to find out more about a fund from public sources and do some basic research or simple due diligence on the fund before deciding to buy the fund or walk away. Some quick disclaimers before we start. This is not a product sales pitch or a recommendation to buy. I'm not sponsored by anyone to do this video. Please do your own research and be clear about the product features and risks before taking any action. This video is done as a follow-up request from a viewer's comment in my previous video covering the FundStrat Granny Shorts US Large Cap ETF. If you would like me to cover any funds or ETFs, do drop me a comment in any of my videos, and I'll be happy to work on it as long as I can find enough information on the product. Since I was planning to do a refresh video on DFNS, I thought I would compare the two this round. Therefore, you will find similar comparison data between SHLD and DFNS in this video, as well as the other video focusing on DFNS. Global X also has a UCITS version that has a slightly different portfolio, so I will be comparing that in this video as well. Conflicts are inevitable in human history, as our brains are genetically wired to compete for territory, resources, and power that are often achieved by aggressive means. There is no single day in our modern world that is without any geopolitical conflicts. It is therefore a given that all countries need to establish defense capabilities, from the traditional military solutions of bullets and missiles to the newer age cybersecurity and other technology-related solutions. As such, there is actually a wide and profitable range of stocks to consider when it comes to defense investments. As I am preparing this video, the US-Israel versus Iran war has escalated. I'm sure every observing country is thinking, can I handle precision strikes? Can I fend off swarms of unmanned drone attacks? How do I counter this or retaliate that? All these events reinforce the fact that defense investing is a perpetual investment theme. Global X is a New York-based ETF provider founded in 2008, widely known for its thematic growth, income, and international product suites, in addition to its core, commodities, and alpha strategies. Global X was acquired in 2018 by Mirai Asset Financial Group, a South Korean asset manager. Global X today manages over $115 billion worth of assets and has been expanding its offerings outside of US, particularly in Europe with its UCITS ETFs. The Global X Defense Tech ETF or SHLD is a sub-fund under the Global X Funds fund family. The fund family is set up as a US investment company and covers a long list of Global X ETFs meant to be listed in the US. The ETF is listed on the New York Stock Exchange with the ticker SHLD and is available for trading in US dollars only. Global X doesn't provide manager information at fund level for its ETFs. There is a general company leadership team list in the website, but I will not try to pinpoint any specific persons responsible, as there is no fund-specific information available. The Global X Defense Tech ETF or SHLD tracks the Global X Defense Tech Index, which, as the name implies, is an index created by Global X itself. Let's understand a bit more about this index. I couldn't find information on the history of the indexing business of Global X, but as part of the acquisition, this is all now under the Mirai Asset Global Indices business arm. Mirai Asset Global Indices was established in 2022 as per its website, and provides a pretty long list of indices covering a wide variety of market exposures as seen here. There are a handful of indices still with the Global X branding, that might be the older legacy indices, but most of them are branded under Mirai Asset instead. We will specifically look at the Global X Defense Tech Index that SHLD tracks, but also another similar Mirai Asset Defense Tech Index that is tracked by a UCITS version of SHLD with the ticker ARMR. The Global X Defense Tech Index was created in July 2023, with a base date of 2022. The Mirai Asset Defense Tech Index was created later in May 2024, but interestingly has a much earlier base date of 2014. Index objective descriptions are essentially identical. Both indices share identical stock selection process, whereby the stocks need to be pure play with more than 50% revenue attributable to one or more of the three sub-themes that are cybersecurity, defense technology, and advanced military systems and hardware, as elaborated in the index prospectus. The index has a low market cap requirement of $200 million that allows smaller companies to be considered, though they still need to fulfill a minimum trading liquidity requirement. Both indices also have an 8% allocation cap at constituent level that is rebalanced on semi-annual basis. Global X Defense Tech Index has, however, an additional clause of a second level cap on constituents with more than 5% allocation. As the scope of the investment and stock selection process are identical, both indices logically would have the same stocks selected, and in this case, both currently have 49 constituents. However, because of the second level cap in the Global X Defense Tech Index, the resulting allocations across the stocks end up slightly different. It can be seen in the top 10 list that Mirai Asset Defense Tech Index is more top-heavy, with 7 stocks at 7% or more, while Global X Defense Tech Index has the allocations more spread across the stocks. This in turn leads to a slightly different country allocation. Let's take a quick look at the thematic Defense UCITS ETF or DFNS. DFNS tracks the Market Vector Global Defense Industry Index, which is created and managed by Market Vector, that is a business arm of thematic. This index was created just a few months earlier than Global X Defense Tech Index and has a base date from 2021 onwards. The index is rebalanced quarterly instead of semi-annually, which realigns the allocations back to the index rules faster. The Market Vector Global Defense Industry Index has, however, a higher market cap requirement of $1 billion, resulting in a smaller number of constituents of 36 in the index. As the indices have their own stock selection rules, this also leads to slightly different portfolios. The Market Vector Global Defense Industry Index has notably lower US exposure on country level, and also doesn't have Lockheed Martin, the top position in Global X Defense Tech Index, in this portfolio. We will see later how these differences impact the performances of the three ETFs. As mentioned earlier, the Global X Defense Tech ETF or SHLD is a passive index tracking solution that tracks the Global X Defense Tech Index. Through this, the ETF aims to provide investors with access to invest in companies positioned to benefit for the increased adoption and utilization of defense technology, covering cybersecurity systems, AI and big data, robotics, fuel systems, and military aircrafts. The ETF prospectus provides a bit more details, which I have extracted here, excluding the contents that are specific to the benchmark that we went through earlier. The ETF is required to invest at least 80% in the index constituents, although given this is a passive index tracking solution, the ETF is expected to be fully invested except for a very small amount set aside for liquidity purposes. The ETF adopts a full physical replication approach, which means it will invest directly in all the components of the index with similar allocations. This should normally be easy to achieve, as the index has only a small number of 49 stocks, and they all should have sufficient trading liquidity as per the requirements of the index. The ETF does have the flexibility to adopt a representative sampling approach if needed. It is indicated here the ETF is expected to have more than 95% correlation to the index, so we will check the actual performance differences or tracking error later. The Global X Defense Tech ETF or SHLD was incepted in September 2023, a few months after the underlying index was created. It currently has a pretty decent AUM of over 7.7 billion US dollars. In contrast, its UCITS version ARMR was incepted a year later in September 2024 and currently has only about 650 million US dollars of assets. The thematic Defense UCITS ETF or DFNS, on the other hand, was incepted a few months earlier than SHLD and currently has a slightly higher AUM of 8.9 billion US dollars. All three ETFs use a full physical replication approach to track their respective indices. While the ETF portfolios are not completely identical to their indices, we can see here again the differences among the three ETFs in terms of country breakdown. Again, SHLD and ARMR from Global X have slightly higher US exposures, with several countries at tail end with less than 1%. The differences are also again seen in the top 10 holdings, with Lockheed Martin being the largest holding in SHLD and ARMR, but absent in DFNS. Even between SHLD and ARMR, there are differences in allocations because of the second level cap in the Global X Defense Tech Index. As earlier mentioned, the Global X Defense Tech ETF or SHLD is listed on the New York Stock Exchange and available for trading in US dollars only, which is common for US listed ETFs. ARMR and DFNS, being Europe-listed UCITS ETFs, are listed on multiple European stock exchanges in various trading currencies. Euro or sterling investors, for example, will have no choice but to go for the Europe-listed ETFs. The fee structure across the three ETFs are similar. SHLD and ARMR have a slightly lower 0.50% for total expense ratio or TER, while DFNS has 0.55%. Another small difference is that SHLD is a semi-annual distributing share class, again common for US listed ETFs, while ARMR and DFNS are accumulation only. That being said, the distribution yield of SHLD is extremely low at just 0.39%, since most of these defense companies don't really pay out dividends. In any case, it should also be noted that US listed ETFs distribution payouts are subject to US withholding tax, where applicable. One good thing about SHLD that I can't seem to find in ARMR and DFNS is the availability of the trading premium discount information. Here, it shows the premium or discount history of SHLD for the full year of 2025, where we can see the ETF traded most of the time at a slight premium, with roughly a plus minus 0.5% range in normal market conditions. There were a few days of spikes though following market volatility that led to a high premium of 3.3% and a low discount of minus 1.37%. Investors interested in this ETF can take this as a reference when thinking about setting the price to buy or sell the ETF. The performance information of the Global X Defense Tech ETF or SHLD is quite limited since it has a short track record. So there is only a short performance table available in the ETF webpage and fact sheet. Based on the limited data, we can see there is a small tracking error between the ETF and the index that hopefully will get better in the long run. Calendar year returns are available in Morningstar. That shows the ETF has had a fantastic run so far, with 35% in 2024 and 74% in 2025, and looking good year to date as well. Let's first compare SHLD with DFNS. that has about the same track record length since September 2023. While the two ETFs have slightly different portfolios as we went through earlier, their performances are actually near identical, as seen in this morning's star chart since the inception of SHLD. As such, purely on performance basis so far, there is really no difference going for one or the other. I mentioned Lockheed Martin is currently the top stock in SHLD but absent in DFNS. Looking at this chart, we can deduce that SHLD probably added the stock only recently. Otherwise, the poor performance of the stock would have dragged the ETF down. Let's add in ARMR that has about a year shorter worth of track record. Since inception of ARMR in September 2024, all three ETFs have exhibited high correlations, with ARMR having slightly better performance and SHLD having slightly worse performance. This time period is however too short to make any conclusions, as we will need probably 3 to 5 years worth of track record and maybe a full market cycle to see which ETF turns out better. Let's focus on SHLD. The ETF has strongly outperformed the MSCI All Country World Index since inception, showing that defense investing has been highly profitable in the past 2 years or so. While all markets move in cycles, and it is not reasonable to expect the ETF to deliver over 40% every year, there is a decent likelihood for this team to continue to do decent, as long as the general equity markets have a decent positive trend. Pure play is an important factor in defense investing, as mentioned earlier. The older ETFs tend to combine traditional aerospace sector with defense together, leading to a much weaker performance as shown here. There are also some newer ETFs that focus more on technology stocks instead of industrial leaders in traditional weaponry. These also have underperformed on relative basis, showing the SHLD's current approach of having majority exposure in the industrials still makes better sense. With that, let's summarize our findings. Global X is a US-based asset management firm well known in providing ETFs covering thematic and alternative investment exposures. It was founded in 2008 and acquired by Mirai Asset Financial Group in 2018. Global X currently manages over $115 billion of assets. The Global X Defense Tech ETF or SHLD is a pure play solution, investing into the defense team. It is a passive index ETF tracking the Global X Defense Tech Index. The index is in turn created by Global X and is now under the Mirai Asset Global Indices business arm as part of the firm's ecosystem. Some investors may think there might be some conflict of interest here, but the solutions are simply passive index trackers, and I think this is a highly efficient way to create new thematic solutions without too many parties involved. The index is pure play that doesn't include commercial aerospace stocks, but instead focuses on both industrials and technology names that generate more than 50% revenue from defense industries. The $200 million market cap requirement covers both large firms and smaller players for a slightly wider universe. It also has a 8% position cap rebalanced semi-annually to ensure position diversification. This is a US listed ETF that is traded only in US dollars. There is, however, a Europe listed version called Global X Defense Tech UCITS ETF or ARMR that is just marginally different from SHLD as another trading choice for investors. As with typical US listed ETFs, SHLD comes with a semi-annual distribution payout. The distribution yield is, however, only a low 0.39% and is subject to US withholding tax where applicable. The ETF has exhibited a strong performance since inception, partly attributed to its pure play approach and partly due to a market focus in the defense team in the recent years. Track record is a bit short though, so investors should be mindful that all markets move in cycles and investments into a specific theme like this one should be done prudently and within your own risk tolerance. In conclusion, the Global X Defense Tech ETF or SHLD presents itself as a strong performing pure play solution for investors who want to get specific exposure into the defense theme. For investors who do not like the US listed vehicle, Global X also offers a marginally different Europe listed version that is ARMR. This concludes my absolutely biased comments on the Global X Defense Tech ETF that has the Bloomberg ticker SHLD, and I hope it will help in your investment journey. May we all grow wiser and prosper.